Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and you might be familiar with the idea of cycles. No, not the cycling mechanic. Pieces of a set that repeat across all 5 colors or color groupings of that set. The 5 incarnations of Modern Horizons 2, the 5 commands in Strixhaven, and the 10 snow dual lands of Kaldheim. These are all cycles. They are typically contained to a set, or if you're a set like Ravnica, maybe 2 so you can get all 10 colors of signets. But there's something else we do on very rare occasions. And it doesn't just take one set, it takes many. The Supercycle. Intrigued? Let's dig in. It all started with Mirage in 1996. The team had a conundrum. Teferi's Isle, yes, that Teferi, was an important location in the story, so they wanted to put it in the set as a legendary land. But clearly, Teferi's Isle needed to be tied to blue mana, and there were no other legendary lands that made sense for the other 4 colors. So they came up with an idea. What if they created what they called a mega cycle? They would do 1 new land tied to a color in every block for the next 5 years. That would balance out all 5. So they made Teferi's Isle in Mirage, and then followed it up with Volrath's Stronghold in Stronghold, Yavimaya Hollow in Urza's Destiny, Core Haven in Nemesis, and finally Keldon Necropolis in Invasion, 5 years later in 2001. Now in retrospect, this reasoning didn't really pan out. The cards weren't all legal and standard together, so you never saw the full balancing effect of all 5 at once, and they appeared at wildly different power levels. But the idea of cycling something out over time, well, that had a lot of merit. As an aside, it always bothered me that in this cycle, Teferi's Isle produced colored mana while the other ones didn't, and Keldon Necropolis had a 5 mana activation. Aesthetics, man, aesthetics. And I guess that's exactly what the Time Spiral design team was thinking too when they made both Academy Ruins and Kara Keep. Now we just need a green legendary land with a 1 green activation and we're golden, but I digress. These mega cycles, or as they became more commonly referred to, Supercycles, are something we've only done a handful of times in all of Magic. They take years to execute on and really need a theme and space that is going to hold up. There are 5 other main Supercycles that come to mind, 3 of which I had a hand in myself. Now, if you think there's one I missed, let me know in the comments down below. The first is the Magus Supercycle. This started with Magus of the Wheel in Commander 2015. These were all throwing back to the Magus cycle from Time Spiral block. Each of them shared a part of their name and the mana cost of a famous magic spell. Magus of the Wheel cast Wheel of Fortune, Magus of the Will, Yawgmoth's Will, Magus of the Mind, Mind's Desire, Magus of the Balance, Balance, and Magus of the Order, Natural Order. After 6 years, the cycle finally wrapped up in 2020. 6 years isn't bad, but there are some that go for longer, a lot longer, like the Lings. This started off with Morphling in Urza Saga. That had its pre-release in September of 1998. It was never really intended as a super cycle, but then Planar Chaos made Torchling nearly 10 years later in 2007. And the super cycle was off to the races. Thornling came in Conflux in 2009, and by the way, someday we really need to reprint that card with the proper mirrored Ling artwork. Anyway, 9 years after that, when I was working on Battle Bond, I was trying to design some mythic rares for my set and asked Mark Rosewater which cycles players wanted to be complete. He said Lings, and immediately I knew that would be a home run, so I made Brightling. And then finally, in 2019, a whopping 21 years after the initial card appeared, the cycle was finished in Modern Horizons 1 with Endling. 21 years. Wow, nothing could take longer than that, right? Well, the answer is it depends. The Lings are currently on top, but 3 Supercycles are still active. Now, it's unlikely that the currently active Omnath Supercycle will take that long. This started with Worldwake in 2010, adding a color every time we saw Omnath again. But unless we wait to make the 5-color Omnath until 2030, that's not going to beat the Lings Supercycle run. Though, who knows? Maybe we can get there if we ever make a 5-color plus colorless mana Omnath. Next up is the Mage cycle. No, not the Magi again, the Mages. This began with Trinket Mage in 5th Dawn back in 2004. Then when we went back to Mirrodin, we saw Treasure Mage in 2011's Mirrodin Besieged. When we were working on Aether Revolt, I had the idea to do Trophy Mage. And then Modern Horizons 1 picked it up with Tribute Mage. Mages for 4-mana artifacts and 5-mana artifacts may someday be forthcoming. This cycle currently has 17 years on it, and we need to make it 4 more to rival the Lings. Certainly possible. Finally, the last one I want to talk about is one of the best known, and one that definitely has a shot of dethroning the Ling someday. That is the swords. First appearing in Darksteel, these were a smash hit instantly, but strangely, there were only 2, Sword of Fire and Ice and Sword of Light and Shadow. Where were the others? Fans would speculate for years about the swords of nature and artifice or something like that to finish off the cycle with 1 more sword. Well, it turns out that was actually just 2 pieces of a much larger cycle. Scars of Mirrodin block would give us the remainder of the enemy swords in Sword of Body and Mind, Sword of Feast and Famine, and Sword of War and Peace. But that still left the allied swords to do. Just a couple years ago, Modern Horizons picked up 2 of them, in Sword of Sinew and Steel and Sword of Truth and Justice. And most recently, Modern Horizons 2 just put Sword of Hearth and Home into the world. Now we'll definitely be doing the blue-black and red-green swords at some point, but will they hold out to at least October 6th, 2024, 7,561 days after Darksteel's pre-release so they can surpass the Ling's run? Only time will tell. Bonus mention to Sword of Dungeons & Dragons, of course, though, for being an honorary 11th member of this cycle. And speaking of honorable mentions, shout out to the Kodama cycle, who I didn't count for this because 3 of the 4 existing cards were in the same block, but you'll get your missing West tree eventually, I'm sure. And there you go. Everything to know about Supercycles. Is there a cycle you're hoping will be completed? Let me know in the comments down below, and maybe I'll get working on it. I'll talk with you again on Monday, but until then, may you see the end of a plan that spanned many years. You got this. Players asked for Counterspell to be legal in Modern, and although Counterspell was printed many more times and in the new frame with things like dual decks, promos, and master sets, it was never in a set that made it Modern legal. There's something about the card that just speaks to Magic players, no matter